I stared at the crumpled photo of our wedding day with disbelief, my stomach nodding as the truth I'd been avoiding finally crystallized. My name is Fred McLean, and I'm 34 years old. Each morning now, I wake alone in the house I built, brewing coffee strong enough to match the resolve I've developed since that night. My wife, Macy McLean, chose to betray our vows with Officer Tyler Briggs, a man who wore his badge like armor against consequences. My brother Mike warned me about her distancing months ago, but loyalty blinded me. When Briggs' fist connected with my jaw that night, splitting my lip open, something fundamental shifted inside me. I refused to be defined by their betrayal or destroyed by their deception. The evidence is gathered, the legal strategy in place. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I pulled my truck into the driveway around 6:30, the satisfaction of a completed kitchen remodel settling over me like a familiar blanket. Mrs. Danvers had almost cried when I revealed the finished maple cabinets and quartz countertops, the kind of reaction that made the 14-hour days worth it. My hands were calloused and my shoulders ached, but there's something about building something beautiful that never gets old. The smell of sawdust clung to my clothes despite changing my shirt before heading out. It was the scent of honest work, though I knew Macy would wrinkle her nose at it. 7 years of marriage, and she still expected me to come home spotless somehow. I took a detour past Jasmine Lotus, the Thai place Macy had been raving about since her friend Jenna introduced her to it. The parking lot was packed, but I didn't mind waiting. 20 minutes later, I had a bag of Pad See Ew, Macy's favorite, and spring rolls that steamed up the inside of my truck with their ginger-scented warmth. The small surprise felt important after weeks of passing each other like ghosts in our own hallways. As I turned onto our street, I noticed a dark Ford Explorer parked slightly crooked along the curb near our house. Tinted windows, polished finish, probably one of the neighbors having company over. The Andersons were always hosting friends from their church group. I grabbed the takeout bag and my toolbox from the passenger seat, the weight familiar in my hand. The porch light was on, though the sun hadn't fully set yet, that warm summer glow still hanging on the horizon. I remembered installing that light fixture myself 3 summers ago, Macy holding the ladder steady, laughing when I dropped a screw and had to climb all the way back down to find it in the grass. The key turned smoothly in the lock, another small repair I'd made last month. The hinges didn't squeak anymore, something I realized too late as I stepped into the house unannounced. Soft jazz filtered through the living room. John Coltrane, I think. It was what Macy called her date night music, which made me pause. Was today something special? Had I forgotten an anniversary or milestone? My mind raced through dates as I set my toolbox down by the door. "Mace," I called out, lifting the takeout bag. "I brought dinner from that place you like." No answer, but the music continued. I kicked off my work boots out of habit and padded across the hardwood floor I'd installed our second year in the house. The smell of jasmine candles mixed with the Thai food, creating a strange combination that somehow worked. As I rounded the corner into the living room, I froze. Macy was on our couch, the gray sectional we'd picked out together at some overpriced furniture store she'd insisted on. But she wasn't alone. Her back was to me, but I could see her blonde hair cascading down as she leaned into him. Officer Tyler Briggs. I recognized him immediately from the community picnic last summer. His uniform shirt hung open, revealing a white undershirt, and his hands were on my wife's waist like he owned her. The takeout bag slipped from my fingers. Containers tumbled out, spilling noodles and sauce across the floor I'd refinished just last year. They jumped apart at the sound, Macy whirling around, eyes wide. Her lipstick was smudged, her blouse partially unbuttoned. "Fred!" she gasped, smoothing her hair. "I thought you were working late." Tyler didn't move from the couch. He just sat there, leaning back like he belonged. His badge was clipped to his belt, glinting under our ceiling light. "Fred, please," Macy said, stepping toward me. "Don't make this a scene." A scene? The words felt thick in my mouth. In my own house? Tyler finally stood, deliberately slow, buttoning his shirt with an unhurried precision that made my blood boil. "You should probably calm down," he said, his voice carrying that authoritative edge cops use at traffic stops. "Both of you need to leave," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now." Macy crossed her arms. "Fred, this isn't—" "Get out." I pointed to the door, my hand trembling. Tyler stepped forward, close enough that I could smell Macy's perfume on him. "You don't give orders here, buddy." "In my house, I do." His smirk deepened, and something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Wrong move." I saw it coming but couldn't react fast enough. His fist connected with the side of my face, a practiced strike that sent me sprawling backward. My head cracked against the edge of the coffee table as I fell. The room spun. Warm copper flooded my mouth as I touched my lip and saw blood on my fingers. From the floor, I looked up at Tyler standing over me, his badge catching the light like a warning. "You're done," I whispered, tasting blood with every word. I wiped blood from my lip with the back of my hand, the metallic taste filling my mouth. My ears rang like I'd been standing next to a jackhammer all day. The room felt tilted, like I was on the deck of a ship instead of my own living room floor. Through the pounding in my head, I heard them arguing in hushed, frantic whispers at the front door. Tyler's voice cutting through Macy's higher pitch, something about handling this and keeping your story straight. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. One fell, the glass cracking as it hit the hardwood. Our wedding photo. Fitting. I stumbled to my feet, grabbing the edge of the couch to steady myself. My breath came ragged and shallow, like my lungs couldn't quite remember how to work. The room spun once, then settled into focus. My phone was still in my pocket. With shaking hands, I pulled it out and opened the camera. Record. Red dot blinking. "This is Fred McLean," I said, voice steadier than I expected. "It's approximately 8:35 p.m. on Friday, June 12th. Officer Tyler Briggs just assaulted me in my home after I found him with my wife." I panned the camera slowly across the room. The Thai food splattered across the floor, a broken glass coaster under the coffee table where my head had hit, drops of blood on the cream-colored carpet. "I have a split lip, possible concussion." I turned the camera to my face, documenting the damage. Officer Briggs was in plain clothes but identified himself as law enforcement during the confrontation. I ended the recording and saved it, then immediately backed it up to my cloud storage. Can't be too careful when the person who attacked you carries a badge. Next call, 911. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. "I need to report an assault that just occurred at my residence." I recited my address and gave my name. "Are you injured, sir?" "Yes, but it's not life-threatening. Split lip, possible concussion. The assailant has left the premises." "Do you know who assaulted you?" "Yes, Officer Tyler Briggs. He's with the local police department." A brief pause. "I'll connect you with patrol." "Please stay on the line." 20 minutes later, two uniformed officers stood in my living room, Officer Ramirez and Officer Kemp, according to their name tags. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same badge that had split my lip was now here to investigate itself. "So, you're saying Officer Briggs struck you unprovoked?" Ramirez asked, jotting notes in his small pad. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with the neutral expression of someone who'd seen it all. "That's correct," I said, holding an ice pack to my cheek. "I asked him and my wife to leave my house. He responded by punching me in the face." "And they were—" Kemp, the younger officer, let the question hang. "I walked in on them together on that couch." I nodded toward the sectional. "Romantically involved." Kemp, to his credit, didn't smirk or exchange knowing glances with his partner. He just nodded and continued taking photos of the scene. The blood drops, the spilled food, the broken picture frame. "I have video," I said, pulling up the recording on my phone. "Not of the assault, but immediately after, and I took photos of my injuries." Ramirez watched the video, his face unreadable. "This helps. We'll need a written statement." "I can have one ready for you before you leave," I said. "You mentioned Officer Briggs was in plain clothes?" Ramirez asked. "Yes, uniform shirt unbuttoned, badge on his belt." "How long have you known Officer Briggs?" I thought for a moment. "We've met at community events. I didn't know him personally." I paused, a memory clicking into place. "But I've seen his truck before. Parked on this street." "His truck?" Ramirez looked up from his notepad. "Dark Ford Explorer. It was outside tonight, but I've seen it before when I've come home late from jobs." Kemp and Ramirez exchanged a glance. "My neighbor across the street, Mrs. Alvarez," I added. "She has security cameras. They point toward the street. I can ask her for the footage tomorrow." Ramirez nodded slowly. "That would be helpful." After providing my written statement and watching them bag the broken glass as evidence, I walked the officers to the door. My cheek throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat. "We'll file this report tonight," Ramirez said. "Someone will contact you about next steps." I stood in the doorway long after their patrol car disappeared down the street. The night was quiet now, just crickets and the distant hum of a neighbor's air conditioner. Turning back to the empty house, my eyes fell on the couch where hours earlier Macy had sat with another man. The cushions still held their imprints. "I won't be your victim," I whispered to the empty room. Back in the kitchen, I opened my laptop and waited for it to boot up. The clock on the microwave read 1:47 a.m. I knew I wouldn't sleep tonight. Or maybe for many nights to come. I typed into the search bar, "Internal Affairs Complaint Process." This was just the beginning. I stayed up all night. What else could I do? Sleep wasn't an option with my jaw throbbing and my mind spinning circles around what I'd witnessed. The image of Macy and Tyler together burned behind my eyelids every time I tried closing them. When sunrise finally broke through the kitchen blinds, I was still at the table, nursing my third cup of coffee. The ice pack against my jaw had gone warm hours ago, but I pressed it there anyway, a sad comfort against the swelling. My phone buzzed beside my empty mug. Macy's name lit up the screen. "We need space. Don't contact me." I stared at the message, reading it 3 times. Space? Like I was the one who'd broken something? I set the phone down without responding. What could I possibly say that would matter now? 10 minutes later, my email chimed. The subject line read, "Notice of filing, McLean vs. McLean." My stomach dropped as I opened the attachment. Macy's attorney, someone I'd never heard of, had filed for a trial separation with the court. The document claimed irreconcilable differences and hostile environment. Nothing about her affair. Nothing about Tyler's assault. Just me, painted as unstable. I exhaled through my nose, not even surprised. This wasn't about emotions anymore. This was war. By 8 o'clock, I was in my truck heading toward my brother's place across town. Mike opened the door before I could knock, took one look at my face, and whistled low. "Jesus, Fred, what happened to you?" He ushered me inside, past the smell of bacon and coffee. I sat at his kitchen table while Mike poured me a fresh cup. His kids were at school, his wife at work. Just us. "Macy's been cheating," I said flatly. "With a cop." Mike's eyes narrowed. "How'd you find out?" "Walked in on them, in our living room." "And your face?" "He did this." I gestured to my bruised jaw. "When I asked them to leave." Mike swore, slamming his mug down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. "You file a report?" "Yeah. 2 officers came by last night." "Good." He studied me. "So, what's your plan?" I slid my phone across the table, showing him Macy's text and the separation filing. Mike read it, his expression darkening. "She's getting ahead of it," he said, "making herself look like the victim." "That's what I figured." Mike leaned forward, eyes intense. "Listen to me, Fred. This is important. You fight this clean, not blind. You understand? That anger you're feeling, it's going to push you to do something stupid. Don't let it." I nodded, throat tight. "Have you called Laura?" he asked. "Laura Singh. My attorney from when we'd set up the house deed and the postnuptial agreement after Macy and I went through that rough patch 3 years back." "Not yet." "Do it. Now." 2 hours later, I sat in Laura's office downtown. She hadn't changed much since I'd last seen her. Same sharp eyes, same no-nonsense posture as she reviewed the police report I'd brought. "This is serious, Fred," she said finally. "Assault by a police officer? Plus the infidelity claim?" "I know." She tapped her pen against her desk. "What about your postnuptial agreement?" I brought a copy. I slid the folder across her desk. Laura reviewed it, nodding slowly. "This is helpful. Very helpful." She looked up. "Section 8 is quite clear. Proven infidelity nullifies any spousal support claims and grants you full rights to the marital home." For the first time since last night, I felt my pulse steady. "So, I have a case. You have the beginning of one. We need evidence, concrete proof of the affair, texts, call logs, witness statements." She jotted notes on her legal pad. "And that surveillance footage you mentioned from your neighbor? We need that immediately." "I'll get it today." "Good. Don't delete anything. Don't confront Macy, and don't speak to Officer Briggs under any circumstances. Let me handle the communication." She fixed me with a serious look. "Can you do that?" "Yes." That evening, I knocked on Mrs. Alvarez's door. She was a small woman in her 70s who'd lived across from us for years. When she saw my face, her eyes widened. "Dios mío, Fred! What happened?" I gave her the sanitized version. An intruder, a confrontation. I didn't want to air my dirty laundry, not yet. Mrs. Alvarez, your security cameras. Do they keep footage from the past week? Yes, my grandson set it up to save for 2 weeks. She invited me in, leading me to her small office where a desktop computer hummed. What day do you need? Every night this past week, if possible. She didn't ask why, just clicked through folders until she found the right dates. I watched over her shoulder as she played the footage. There it was, Tyler's Explorer, parked in my driveway. Monday night, 8:42 p.m., Wednesday, 9:15 p.m., Friday, 10:36 p.m., always when I worked late. Would you be willing to save these for me? I asked. My attorney may need them. Of course. She copied the files to a flash drive, handing it to me without questions. That was the kind of neighbor Mrs. Alvarez was, helpful without being nosy. Back in my truck, I plugged the drive into my laptop. The grainy black and white footage played again, timestamp glowing in the corner, 10:36 p.m. Friday night, less than 24 hours before I caught them. That's all the proof I'll ever need, I whispered, closing the laptop. I sat across from Lara Singh in her downtown office, watching as she arranged a stack of forms on her mahogany desk. Morning light filtered through vertical blinds, casting stripes across the paperwork. The bruise on my jaw had darkened overnight, a purplish reminder of what happened. We need to approach this systematically, Lara said, adjusting her glasses. First, we file a formal police misconduct complaint against Officer Briggs. Second, we report the assault directly to Internal Affairs. They operate somewhat independently from the regular police chain of command. Will they actually investigate one of their own? I asked. They have to, especially with physical evidence and witness corroboration. She slid a form toward me. This is the official IA complaint. It details the assault, the circumstances, and requests disciplinary action. I scanned the document, the legal language translating my broken marriage into cold procedural terms, my life reduced to a file number. And this one, she continued, sliding another form forward, is the formal misconduct complaint. It goes into the system permanently, meaning if Briggs has any other complaints, they'll start seeing a pattern. How many forms do we need? I asked. Enough to make it impossible to ignore, Lara replied with the hint of a smile. Police departments hate paper trails. I signed each document carefully, my signature growing firmer with each page. This wasn't about revenge. This was about accountability. What about Macy? I asked, setting down the pen. One step at a time. Right now we focus on the assault. The infidelity claim comes next, once we've secured your safety. She gathered the signed papers. In the meantime, you should change your locks and install cameras. Document everything. On my way home, I stopped at the hardware store and bought new deadbolts, a digital doorbell camera, and 2 motion-activated security cameras. I spent the afternoon installing them, testing the motion alerts on my phone. The house felt different now, no longer a home, but evidence to be protected. Around 1 o'clock, Mike showed up with sandwiches from Sal's Deli. We sat on the back deck, away from the neighbors' curious eyes. How'd it go with Lara? He asked, unwrapping his pastrami on rye. Good. She's filing complaints with Internal Affairs and the department. I picked at my sandwich, appetite still weak. Change the locks too. Mike nodded approvingly. Smart move. We ate in silence for a minute before I set my sandwich down. Part of me still can't believe it, that she'd do this. I gestured vaguely at the house. Here, in our home. So publicly. The taste of mustard suddenly reminded me of picnics we'd had in the backyard, Macy laughing as she passed me potato salad, sunlight in her hair, hand on mine, back when touch meant something different. Mike's voice pulled me back. Look, Fred, she already chose her side. Make sure it costs her. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. I know that sounds harsh, but you need to protect yourself now. She's not the woman you thought she was. Yeah. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yeah, I know. After Mike left, I finished mounting the last camera overlooking the driveway. By evening, the new security system was fully operational, sending alerts directly to my phone. I was washing dishes when the first alert came through at 9:42 p.m. I dried my hands and checked the notification. Motion detected. Front yard. The footage showed a dark Explorer driving slowly past the house, headlights dimmed to a dull glow. It circled the block, then passed by again, even slower this time. Tyler Briggs, checking if I was home. My hands shook slightly as I saved the clip and forwarded it to Lara and the detective assigned to my case. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This felt like intimidation. I barely slept that night, Morning came with the harsh buzz of my phone, a text from Macy. "You're escalating this. Stop before you regret it." I stared at those words, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't my wife anymore. This was someone threatening me for seeking justice. I typed back, "No more warnings. You crossed the line." After blocking her number, I gathered all my evidence: the police report, the neighbor's surveillance footage, photos of my injuries, the new footage of Tyler's truck, and arranged them in a large manila envelope. I labeled it clearly: Internal Affairs, Confidential. At the post office, I paid for overnight delivery, watching as the clerk stamped the tracking receipt. The weight of the envelope felt like justice starting to move, slow but certain. 2 days after mailing the evidence, I pulled up to Macy's sister's house in the suburbs. The tidy colonial with its manicured lawn looks nothing like our place, which was probably exactly why Macy had chosen to stay here, distance from anything that reminded her of me. I sat in the truck for a moment, gathering my thoughts. The manila folder on the passenger seat held copies of everything I'd sent to Internal Affairs: photos of my bruised face, the 911 call transcript, neighbor's security footage, all the evidence of betrayal, printed in black and white. I wasn't here for reconciliation. I was here for clarity. The porch steps creaked under my boots as I approached the front door. I knocked firmly, twice. Macy opened the door wearing gray sweatpants and one of those yoga tops she always bought but never wore to actual yoga. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and for a split second she looked like the woman I'd fallen for years ago, before her expression hardened into something cold and unfamiliar. "What are you doing here?" she asked, blocking the doorway with her body. "I told you I needed space." "We need to talk," I said. 10 minutes. That's all." She crossed her arms. "You're obsessed, Fred. This isn't healthy." I held up the photo of my bruised face, the split lip still visible in the harsh flash of the camera. Next to it, the 911 report with the officer's signature at the bottom. "I'm just organized," I replied. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. The living room was pristine. Her sister always kept everything perfect, unlike our comfortable clutter at home. I wondered if Macy felt out of place here too. "Make it quick," she said, perching on the edge of an armchair. "Amber will be back soon." I sat across from her, placed the folder on the coffee table between us. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to lay out facts." "Facts?" She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Like how you're trying to destroy Tyler's career?" "Tyler destroyed his own career when he assaulted me in my home." I opened the folder and methodically spread the contents across the table. "Here's what I have: security footage showing his truck at our house while I was working late, the 911 call, photos of my injuries, and this." I slid the postnuptial agreement toward her. "Section 4, paragraph B. The infidelity clause you signed." Her eyes flickered over the documents, then back to me. "You're really doing this? Destroying 2 lives out of spite? You destroyed yours when you let him in our house." I kept my voice level, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "This isn't spite, it's consequences." She looked away, fidgeting with the edge of her shirt. It wasn't what you think." "Then what was it, Macy?" "It just happened. We were unhappy. You were never home." "I was working," I cut in. "Building the life you said you wanted." Her eyes flashed. "I wanted you, not the house or the money or any of it. But you were always gone, always tired." The old argument. I'd heard it before, during our last round of counseling. Back then, I'd believed it was fixable. Now I recognized it for what it was: justification. Macy reached for her phone. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling Tyler." "Go ahead," I said. "Put him on speaker. I want him to hear this too." She dialed, jaw tight. 2 rings later, his voice filled the room. "Hey, babe, everything okay?" "Fred's here," she said. "He's got papers, photos, security footage." A pause, then Tyler's voice, smug and confident. "So what? He's trying to scare you." "He can't touch us." I leaned forward. "We'll see what your department thinks about the footage, Officer Briggs, and what the judge thinks about the assault." The line went silent. Then, "You son of a—" The call ended abruptly. Macy stared at the phone in her hand. "You've lost your mind." "No, I've found my spine." I gathered the papers back into the folder, leaving only the postnup on the table. "The hearing's in 2 weeks. If you want to settle before then, have your attorney call Lara." I stood to leave. Macy followed me to the door, her confidence visibly cracking. "You won't win this," she said, but her voice wavered. "The police protect their own." "Not when there's proof. Not anymore." I stepped onto the porch. "When the truth hits court, you'll lose everything, Macy. The house, the accounts, your reputation. Is he worth it?" She didn't answer. Just stared at me with something between anger and fear. That evening, I sat in my truck outside my empty house, dashboard lights illuminating my face in the growing darkness. On my phone screen glowed the confirmation email from Internal Affairs, re-complaint.iad 2023-114. "Mr. McLean, we have received your formal complaint against Officer Tyler Briggs. A preliminary investigation has been initiated." Through the rearview mirror, I watched a car slow down near my driveway, then speed away when my motion lights activated. I didn't need to see the license plate to know who it was. Across town, Macy stood in her sister's doorway, watching me drive away. I couldn't hear her, but I knew what she was saying into her phone. Tyler. He's serious this time. The next morning, I was up early, sorting through the pile of invoices that had stacked up while my life imploded. Running your own renovation business doesn't stop for personal drama. I just finished my second cup of coffee when my phone vibrated against the kitchen counter. Lara Singh's name flashed on the screen. "Fred," she said, her voice carrying that professional excitement lawyers get when things go their way. "I just got word from my contact at the department. Internal Affairs placed Tyler Briggs on desk duty pending investigation." I set my coffee down. "Already? That was fast. Not fast enough for my taste, but yes. They're taking the assault seriously, especially with the evidence we provided. His badge and service weapon have been temporarily surrendered." A small smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Not from spite, from relief. The system was actually working. "What about the hearing?" I asked. "Still scheduled, but this development strengthens our position considerably. When a police officer is under investigation for misconduct, it adds significant weight to our case." We discussed a few more details before ending the call. After we hung up, I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd built a life. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could take a full breath. That feeling lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. I'd spent the afternoon at a job site, measuring for new cabinets. When I returned to my truck, I noticed it immediately. Deep scratches carved across both doors on the driver's side. Not random vandalism, but deliberate strokes that gouged through paint to the metal beneath, spelling out a single word: stop. My stomach knotted as I ran my fingers along the damage. Each letter was carved with such force that the metal had curled outward at the edges. This wasn't kids or random vandalism. This was targeted. I called Mike right away. He arrived 20 minutes later with his digital camera. "Jesus," he whispered, crouching beside the truck. "This is bad, Fred." "It's him," I said, watching Mike photograph each scratch from multiple angles. "Has to be." Mike stood up, jaw tight. "You need to report this." "Already texted the detective. He's sending someone." While we waited, Mike leaned against his own truck, arms crossed. "You know he's going to escalate, right? Men like that don't back down. They double down." "I know." I stared at the damage, calculating the repair costs in my head. "But if he keeps coming, he keeps making mistakes." The responding officer took more pictures, filed the report, and left with copies of my security footage, which, frustratingly, hadn't captured the area where my truck was parked. I'd be fixing that tonight. Later that afternoon, Lara called again. Her voice had lost its earlier optimism. "Tyler's union rep has produced a witness," she said. "A rookie officer who claims he saw you agitated and threatening toward Tyler at McLaren's bar about 6 months ago." "What? I've never even seen him off duty before he was in my house." "I know. It's clearly fabricated, but it complicates things. They're trying to establish a pattern where you had some personal vendetta against him." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Unbelievable. There's more. Macy's attorney just filed a counterclaim alleging you created a hostile environment throughout your marriage. They're trying to invalidate the postnuptial by claiming you were emotionally abusive." The pieces clicked together. They're coordinating their stories. "Exactly." Lara's voice hardened. "But we have evidence. They have hearsay. Keep documenting everything, Fred. Every incident, every contact attempt." That night, I installed 2 more cameras covering my driveway and the side of the house. I was exhausted, but too wired to sleep. Around midnight, I finally crawled into bed, tablet propped on my nightstand with the security feed running. I must have dozed off, because the alert chime jolted me awake at 1:24 a.m. I grabbed the tablet, heart racing. The night vision feed showed a figure at my back gate testing the lock. Even with the grainy quality, there was no mistaking Tyler's build and the way he moved, the same confident swagger I'd seen in my living room weeks earlier. I called 911 immediately, keeping my voice steady. "There's someone trying to break into my yard. I have a restraining order against him." The dispatcher kept me on the line while officers were dispatched. I watched Tyler circle around to my garage door, trying the handle. When distant sirens wailed, he froze, then bolted toward the street. I moved to my bedroom window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see the patrol car's lights flashing as they pulled up. 2 officers intercepted Tyler before he could reach his vehicle. I watched as they patted him down, cuffed him, and led him to the patrol car. Red and blue lights pulsed against the houses on my street as neighbors' porch lights began flicking on. Behind the safety of my curtain, I felt something uncoil in my chest. "He just gave me everything I needed," I whispered to the empty room. The county courthouse echoed with footsteps and whispers as I sat beside Lara at the plaintiff's table. The polished wood felt cool beneath my palms. Across the aisle, Macy kept her eyes fixed on her folded hands, her attorney leaning close to whisper something in her ear. Tyler sat behind them, shoulders rigid in a navy suit that couldn't hide the restless anger in his posture. His attorney, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, was frantically shuffling papers, mouth moving in a constant stream of hushed advice. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, but nothing prepares you for seeing the 2 people who betrayed you trying to present themselves as victims. My jaw tightened as the bailiff called the room to order. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Eleanor Watkins presiding." Judge Watkins entered, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain. She settled into her chair, glancing over the case file with practiced efficiency. "Be seated. McLean versus McLean, petition for separation with contested terms and concurrent review of the civil restraining order against Tyler Briggs." Her gaze swept across both tables. "Let's begin with the evidence." Lara stood, poised and prepared. "Your Honor, we've submitted substantial documentation establishing both Mrs. McLean's infidelity and Mr. Briggs' assault against my client." The judge nodded, lifting the 911 report. "I've reviewed the initial police report filed by Mr. McLean. Continue." "We have photographic evidence of injuries sustained during the altercation," Lara said, gesturing to the enlarged photos displayed on an easel. My split lip and bruised cheekbone looked worse in the harsh documentation than they had felt at the time. I remembered the sting of antiseptic, the metallic taste of blood. Some wounds don't show in pictures, like finding 2 people you trusted making a mockery of your life in your own living room. The opposing counsel rose. "Your Honor, these images don't establish who initiated the confrontation." "I believe the video does," Lara replied smoothly. She nodded to me and I pulled up the recording on my phone, passing it to the clerk. The courtroom fell silent as my voice filled the space. "You just assaulted me in my home." Then Tyler's reply, crystal clear. "You should have kept your mouth shut." The judge's expression hardened, lines deepening around her mouth. She glanced at Tyler, whose face had gone rigid. "Additionally," Lara continued, "we have security footage from the neighbor's property showing Mr. Briggs' vehicle at the McLean residence on multiple occasions when Mr. McLean was known to be at work." The footage played on the courtroom monitor, timestamp clear in the corner, Tyler's truck pulling into my driveway at 8:42 p.m., 3 days before I caught them. Then again at 9:15 p.m. the following evening. My throat tightened. Each date flashed like a separate betrayal. Judge Watkins removed her glasses. "Mrs. McLean, were you engaging in an extramarital affair with Mr. Briggs?" Macy's attorney tried to intervene. "Your Honor, the nature of their relationship isn't—" "I asked Mrs. McLean," the judge interrupted sharply. Macy finally raised her eyes. I recognized that look, the same defensive stance she'd taken when I confronted her at her sister's house. "We were separated," she stammered. "Were you legally separated at the time these recordings were made?" Judge Watkins pressed. "Not officially, but emotionally. Please answer the question directly." "No," Macy admitted, voice barely audible. Lara stood again. "Your Honor, we have additional evidence." She approached the bench with a folder. "These are text messages between Mrs. McLean and Mr. Briggs spanning 3 months prior to the incident." The judge reviewed them silently while Lara passed copies to opposing counsel. I watched Macy's face pale as she saw the printouts, Messages arranging meetings, planning around my work schedule, intimate exchanges that left nothing to interpretation. The timestamps aligned perfectly with the security footage. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. "Silence," Judge Watkins commanded, banging her gavel once. She examined the papers through narrowed eyes, then looked directly at Macy. "Mrs. McLean, these messages clearly contradict your statement about separation." Macy's attorney leaned toward her, whispering frantically. Tyler shifted in his seat, jaw working back and forth. Judge Watkins set the papers down. "We'll take a 15-minute recess. When we return, I'll hear arguments regarding the postnuptial agreement and restraining order." As the gavel struck again, my shoulders relaxed slightly. Laura squeezed my arm. "It's going well," she whispered. "Stay calm." We filed into the hallway. I headed toward the water fountain, needing a moment to collect myself. The marble floor felt solid beneath my feet, the first stable thing I'd felt in months. I hadn't noticed Macy following until she appeared beside me, eyes glittering with contained fury. "You ruined him," she hissed, voice low enough that only I could hear. "And you'll regret this." I turned to face her fully, meeting her gaze without flinching. The woman I'd once loved was unrecognizable now, a stranger twisted by her own choices. "No," I replied evenly. "I ended it." Her words hung unanswered between us as court officers motioned everyone back inside. My phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. Laura's name lit up the screen. My heart kicked up. This was the call we'd been waiting for. "Fred, I have news." Her voice carried that measured professional tone she used when delivering outcomes, good or bad. I gripped the edge of the counter. "Let's hear it." The judge just signed the final order. "The postnuptial agreement is fully enforced." The subtle lift in her voice told me everything before she even finished. "Macy forfeits any claim to the house, receives no spousal support, and must vacate the premises within 10 days. I closed my eyes, letting the reality settle over me like rainfall after drought. And Tyler? Internal Affairs concluded their investigation yesterday. I could hear pages turning on her end. Their findings were sustained: unnecessary physical force in a domestic dispute, and attempted interference with an investigation. His employment has been terminated, effective immediately. Relief flooded through me. Not jubilation, just the quiet settling of justice finding its mark. What about the assault charges? The DA is moving forward. With our evidence and the IA findings, Tyler's attorney has already approached me about a settlement for your civil damages claim. She paused. It's a substantial offer. I think they're trying to avoid a public trial. I don't need his money, I said, though the repairs to my truck and legal fees had drained my savings. Consider it restitution, not revenge, Lara replied. You're entitled to compensation for damages, both physical and emotional. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. All right, let's do it your way. I'll email the details. And Fred? Her voice softened slightly. This is a clear win. You did everything right. After we hung up, I walked through each room of the house. The place that had become a crime scene, a battlefield, and then a hollow shell was simply home again. I ran my hand along the counter I'd installed myself, remembering how Macy had complained about the color until she saw it finished. I'd believed her smile then. Remember how trust feels before it breaks? It's like walking on solid ground your whole life, never once thinking about what's beneath your feet. 3 months later, I stood on my front porch watching movers load the last of Macy's boxes into their truck. The settlement with Tyler had come through 2 weeks earlier. He'd accepted a plea deal for the assault and paid the fines without a fight. His police career was over. Last I heard, he'd moved 2 counties over. Macy emerged from the house with a small plant in her hands, a jade succulent I'd given her on our 2nd anniversary. She hesitated at the threshold, her eyes scanning what was no longer hers. That's everything, she said, not quite meeting my gaze. I nodded, keeping my face neutral as I signed the delivery receipt. The mover handed me a carbon copy and climbed into the truck. Macy lingered, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married, uncertain, searching for words. But then her expression hardened. I hope it was worth it, she said, voice brittle. It wasn't about worth, I replied quietly. It was about truth. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word, she turned and walked to her car, the succulent clutched against her chest. She threw one last glare over her shoulder before slamming the door. The engine revved louder than necessary as she pulled away. I watched until her taillights disappeared around the corner. "So that's it, huh?" Mike's voice came from behind me. He climbed the steps, a six-pack dangling from his fingers, just in time for the closing ceremonies. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Perfect timing as usual. We sat on the porch steps as the moving truck rumbled away. Mike popped the caps off 2 bottles and handed one to me. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his beer. We clinked bottles. The bitter hops tasted like closure. "She really thought she could outsmart you," Mike said, shaking his head. "Playing the victim while letting that badge-wearing jackass into your home." I took another sip, watching the sunset paint the neighborhood in amber light. They both did. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. The streetlights flickered on one by one. Later, after Mike left, I stood in my doorway. The house was quiet, not the hollow quiet of betrayal, but the peaceful quiet of solitude. I turned the deadbolt, testing its firm resistance against my palm. For the first time in months, I locked my front door without scanning the street for Tyler's truck or wondering which of my belongings Macy might claim next. I leaned my forehead against the solid wood, listening to the silence. It felt clean, earned. 6 months later, I sat on my porch, coffee steaming in my favorite mug, the one with the carpenter's square etched into the side. Mike had given it to me after the court ruling. "For the guy who measured twice and cut once," he'd said with a grin. The morning sun peeked over the eastern horizon, casting long shadows across my newly rebuilt fence. I'd replaced every board myself, working evenings and weekends until my hands were raw and my mind was quiet. The cedar board stood straight and true, a physical boundary between my property and the world, something I should have established long ago. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. Spring had arrived almost without me noticing, too busy rebuilding what had been broken. Not just the fence, but my life. One nail, one board, one day at a time. Mrs. Alvarez waved from her garden next door, pruning shears in her gloved hands. "Beautiful morning, Fred." "The best kind," I called back, raising my mug in greeting. She crossed to the fence, leaning her elbows on the top rail. "Did you hear about your ex-wife?" she asked, her voice dropping to that particular tone people use when they're not sure if they should share gossip. I shook my head. "Haven't been keeping track. I saw her working at that little boutique in the mall, Sparkles, I think it's called, folding sweaters, looking miserable." Mrs. Alvarez's face was sympathetic, though not for Macy. "My niece says they're hiring because nobody stays. The pay is terrible." "That's so." I kept my voice neutral. "Mm-hmm. And get this. Her car got repossessed last week, right from the employee parking lot. Caso todo un scandalo." She shook her head. "Tiffany at the salon says she's behind on rent, too. That fancy apartment she took? Way more than she could afford alone." I nodded, not sure what to feel. Not satisfaction, exactly. Maybe just confirmation that consequences were real things that happened to real people. "What about him? The officer?" I asked, surprising myself. Mrs. Alvarez's expression hardened. "Gone. Left her high and dry once the money and badge were gone. They fought something awful. The whole apartment complex heard it. He blamed her for everything." I stared down at the dark surface of my coffee. "That figures. He's working security now, at that sad little strip mall in Pendleton with the dollar store and the vape shop. My cousin's boy saw him there. Said he looked terrible. Shows up late, smells like whiskey." She clicked her tongue. A shell of what he was pretending to be. The last of my anger dissolved like morning mist. What remained wasn't pity. They'd made their choices, but a calm certainty that justice had worked its slow, grinding way toward balance. "Well," I said finally, "I've got blueprints to finish." Mrs. Alvarez smiled and returned to her roses. "You always were a builder, Fred." Back inside, I spread my latest renovation plans across the kitchen table. A craftsman bungalow restoration, my specialty. The clients wanted to honor the home's bones while bringing it into the present. I understood that better than most. My phone buzzed. A text message. I picked it up, expecting Mike or maybe a supplier with a delivery update. Macy's name appeared on the screen. I made a mistake. 3 words. No context needed. I stared at them for a long moment, remembering how those same fingers had once traced patterns on my skin, how that same voice had once promised forever. No, without opening the message, I deleted it. Then I blocked the number. Some rebuilds aren't worth the effort. Some foundations are too damaged to save. I walked through the living room, straightening a framed blueprint on the wall. My first solo project, the renovation that had launched my business. My fingers lingered on the glass. "You can't build a new life on lies," I whispered to the empty room. The sound of my own voice surprised me. It was clear, untroubled. The voice of a man who had survived the storm and found himself stronger for it. I turned away from the frame and walked toward the front door, drawn by the warm rectangle of sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors. Opening the door, I stepped outside again, inhaling the scent of fresh-cut grass and new beginnings. The door shut behind me with a soft, satisfying click. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.